are in conversation with the Chief Electoral Officer of the independent, no longer independent rather, the Electoral Commission of South Africa, Mr. Sy Mamabolo. Welcome to the Sunday Times Politics Weekly, and I'm your host, Kgothatso Madisa.
You and I, as we sit here, can never fully predict how many parties there are going to be on the ballot. We don't know. We don't know how many independent candidates are going to stand. But what we are certain about is that should the number of contestants go beyond 48 on the national ballot, then it means for the first time we will be introducing a two-column ballot paper where there's one set of parties on the right and another set of parties on the left with a divider in between. If that materializes, of course, it does mean we've got to communicate that well with members of the public so that people don't unwittingly create spoil their ballots.
But how many parties do you have right now that are registered? If you are saying, should they go beyond 48? I thought you had even more.
No, we do.
Yes.
We do. We have on the party register over 500 parties, but it doesn't mean all of them are going to contest.
Okay.
Because the fact that you are on the party register is no guarantee that you must contest. You have certain participation requirements that must be fulfilled. The first of which is that you must submit a list of candidates. You must pay a prescribed deposit.
Of how much?
The deposit has not been determined as yet, but there's a public consultation to consult members of the public, to hear views of parties and so on. I think the proposal is for the elections of the National Assembly about 300,000 and so on. But if you are an independent, it's much lower. I think it's about 45 to contest the National Assembly if you are an independent, and 25,000 if you want to contest the provincial legislature. So it's varied, and the Commission will consider all those submissions and make a determination. So, but the point I was making is that the mere fact that you are on a party register is no guarantee that you're going to contest. You still need to fulfill certain participation requirements, one of which is the deposit, and then submitting a list of candidates. If you don't already have representation in any legislative assembly, then you've got to submit supporting signatures. Of course, the quantum is challenged in the Constitutional Court. 15% of the previous quota of votes per seat. So we are awaiting eagerly the decision of the Concord, because it will determine what those participation requirements are going to be. But once then you satisfy those requirements, only then can you go onto the ballot.
And as you say, it's most likely going to look different. Do you think you will have enough time to educate, a Magogo in rural Eastern Cape, for instance, that, you voted the previous election, this time it's going to look different, here's what to look for, here's what it means. Do you think you'll have enough time to educate?
No, we will. We will. Of course, an election is a time-driven event, and because we can't go now and say to people, here's the ballot. We can't do that now. We are already on the ground doing other things like voter education in relation to the registration process. Balloting education comes later in the process. But the capacity that we need, over 4,000 people are on the ground, going from community to community, teaching people and so on. We have to go back to those communities once the ballot paper issues are sorted out, to now inform those communities about the type and sizes of ballot papers and the impact on how they're going to be voting.
Is it going to be big? Could it lead to spoils? Should it get to that?
Well, if you go, I said if you go beyond 48, it's a 2-column ballot. If you go beyond 96, let's say in the worst case scenario, you have to go beyond 96. We're already talking a 2-page ballot. So you can never discount the fact that the configuration of the ballot, either in 2 pages or in 2 columns, can lead to spoils. You've got to pull all stops to ensure that you inform people and minimize people making mistakes because of the nature and the configuration of the ballot paper.
No, thank you so much for that. Do you think the IEC does enough to educate people about, what the ballot, what to do when you get into the ballot box? We've seen, for instance, you once said, there are no phones allowed in the ballot box, but you end up seeing pictures of people voting in their ballot in the ballot box. So now with this issue, and I'm terming it an issue that could potentially be disastrous, do you not see it being a totally a mess in these coming elections?
We have to avoid a mess. We have to avoid a mess, and we are avoiding a mess by ensuring that, first of all, the configuration of the ballot works and the layout. Because you also can facilitate spoiling by the manner in which you've laid out the ballot. So we are working on that to ensure that it's laid out in a manner that does not lead to spoiled ballots. But you're asking an educational question. Look, education can never be enough. And the IEC will deliver voter education to the extent that it has the resources. We've been doing a lot of interaction with media houses such as yourself and so on, to ensure that you also bring your might and you bring your audiences to understand how the ballot is going to look like, and how it must be marked in a manner that avoids spoiling. In other words, the IEC can never fully do it alone. There are 62 million of us. Even with a big budget, that effort will never be enough to reach each one of those 62 million. So partnerships are important, partnerships with the media, partnerships with civil society.
Still on education, Brasai. We are approaching 30 years of democracy. We are now witnessing despondency, especially from the side of the youth. Still on education. What is it that leads to this despondency, and does it have anything to do with the education for people to understand what that tick that they put on their ballot box means in a democratic South Africa?
Look, we've done some research on the question, and our research tells us people are disengaging not because they don't know what the value of a vote is. On the contrary, the research tells us that the political performance really is what creates the despondency. So it is quite important, and we've shared that research with political parties in the party liaison committee to ensure that they hear the message that is coming from that research to say people are disengaging because of 1, 2, and 3. I think in South Africa we have a very well-informed populace overall. I think people in this country know the value of the vote, and they're disengaging not because they're unaware. They are, in fact, disengaging because they are aware, and they are expressing a view by not going. So we hope that parties hear that message and they respond appropriately.